Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. Welcome to our Zebra Dev Talk. We are thrilled to have you with us for a discussion on using Gen AI to create a web app and easily add data with support for RFID and barcode reading within Enterprise Browser. Before we kick off, let's cover some housekeeping rules here. This webinar is being recorded and will be up on YouTube in about a week. All attendees are currently muted. If you've got a question during the session, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll have a Q&A segment at the end of the session and we'll do our best to answer your queries if time allows. Zebra is committed for empowering our developer community with the right tools and resources, and we would love to share with you how you can join and connect with us. We invite you to join and visit us on Developer Portal and connect with our community on LinkedIn, X, formerly Twitter, and GitHub. Don't miss our first series of developer podcasts, Zebra DevCast, as well. You can scan the QR code on the screen and we'll also share the links in the chat later today. So be sure to follow and connect with us. Before we start the presentation, we are excited to share our upcoming event with you, Zebra DevCon 2025. This is an in-person global event that will connect you with nearly 300 developers and industry experts. You'll get hands-on with our SDKs, a chance to network with our industry experts, and also explore trending industry topics. So keep an eye out for the registration link coming soon. Next slide, please. And with that, I hand it over to you, Ian. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, Priyanka. So yes, hello everybody. My name is Ian Hatton. I'm a pre-sales consultant for Zebra EMEA, based in the UK, but covering the EMEA region. And I'm happy to talk to you today about how one method you can use for easily creating web applications with generative AI tool, and then subsequently you add support for DataWedge to support reading RFID tags and also barcode reading. And we're hosting the application in Enterprise Browser. So we're going to look at the agenda quickly. We look very briefly at Enterprise Browser features for those who are not familiar with it. We're going to look at our latest RFID, mobile RFID readers, RFD 40 and 90, in terms of the hardware. We're then going to focus on the API we have available in Enterprise Browser for RFID reading, and we'll look at how to implement the API in a couple of different ways, as I'll explain as we go through the presentation, and it includes a live demonstration as well, which, with fingers crossed and everything else crossed, hopefully will show you how it works. So Enterprise Browser, basically it's a product that's been around for quite a long time now, evolved originally from Windows Mobile, Windows CE onto Android. And it's basically a browser which is essentially based on the Chromium web view component, but we add a set of APIs to access all the Zebra hardware features, including RFID, but also things like the Wi-Fi, the barcode scanner, NFC, and so on. So it's really a long list of APIs which you can access if you look on our Tech Docs website. And all of those are accessible normally through JavaScript. So you can build a web application with your preferred development tools, and you can add JavaScript to access the Zebra specific features. So it's an open source standard web technology. So basically anybody who can develop web apps basically can use this as a route to developing mobile applications on our devices. It gives you total coverage of Zebra Android devices, going from the small form factor devices up to the tablets, and also the kiosk that we've released recently. So it's across the whole range of our Android products. So normally a thin client architecture. So normally you'd have the applications running on a remote server, but it also supports either seldom connected or fully offline applications as well. So if you have that requirement, you can have all the application files hosted on the device itself. Gives you extensive logging capability. So if you have an issue, you can enable logging, and then you can see things like the incoming source of the web pages coming from the server side. You can log screenshots of what you see on the device itself when each page is rendered. And so you really have quite detailed logging information if something doesn't work. And just a quick word on the licensing. It is a licensed product. Current list pricing for 1 year license, it's 30 euros per device. And for a 5-year license, it's 100 euros per device. So it's quite competitively priced in terms of what it's offering. Basically a route to use web-based development tools to create applications for Zebra devices. Just moving quickly on to the hardware, we're just going to look briefly at the hardware specs. We have released in the last couple of years RFD40 and RFD90. So the RFD40 is the sled you can see in the images there, which is designed more for a retail, light industrial environment. So it's still got a pretty good environmental spec. We've got a 1.5 meter drop spec and an IP54 ceiling spec. We've got a battery of 7,000 milliamp hours, so it gives you a full shift of use from a charged battery. But you can also swap the battery very easily just by clicking out the handle, replacing it with a charged battery. Got a read rate of about 1,300 tags per second and a normal read range of up to 6 meters. So that will vary according to the tag type, but that's what you could typically expect with the right tags. Fairly lightweight device, and it comes in 3 versions. The standard version in the center column doesn't have any wireless capability. And then you've got the premium version, which has Bluetooth 5.3 and Wi-Fi 6. The Bluetooth connection is for connecting normally to a non-Zebra host device. And the Wi-Fi is used for managing the RFD only. So it doesn't allow you to do data transfer. It's just for management of the RFD through an EMM product such as SOTI. And Premium Plus version has the Wi-Fi capability and also a built-in scan engine. So if you're using the RFD with a non-Zebra device, which could be an iOS device, for example, and you need to have barcode scanning built into the front of the RFD, then you can use the Premium Plus version for that. And in a similar way, we have the RFD90, which is the ruggedized version. So this would be used more in a warehouse and heavy industrial environment. Basically the same specs in terms of the battery and the read rate. Read range can either be 6.7 meters with the standard omnidirectional antenna, which you can see on the left-hand picture. And then with the Yagi antenna, which is a directional antenna on the right-hand side, you can get up to approximately 23 meters, again with appropriate RFID tags. So basically you've got a choice between standard and long range. Both versions have got the same ceiling spec, IP65, IP67, and a 1.8 meter drop spec to concrete. And they both include the wireless capability as standard. So you can choose obviously between the 2 models depending on the requirement. And in terms of software support for both products, we have a common RFID API, which we call RFID3. And this is a native API that we can use to develop native apps using the RFID Java SDK, which you can download from our support site at that link. So that would be option number 1. If you want to develop native apps, you can use the Android SDK. We also support development in Xamarin or .NET MAUI for Android using a separate SDK. And we also have a Windows and an iOS SDK available for supporting devices running those OS platforms, which would be non-Zebra devices normally. looking in terms of Enterprise Browser, what we've done really is to take a subset of the RFID 3 API and implement it in JavaScript for Enterprise Browser. So it doesn't have all the same functionality of the full native API, but it has all the core functionality that you need in order to develop an application, a web application that can read and write tags and also do tag filtering and so on. And we'll see that as we move through the presentation. Just a note, when you look at the documentation and you look at the API list for RFID in Enterprise Browser, you'll see that there's an icon next to the API calls, and just make sure if you're developing an Android that has the Android icon beside the function that you want to use, because some of the functions were only implemented on the Windows platform and they're not available on Android. So just be aware that you need to check for the Android icon. So we've got a couple of options for accessing the Enterprise Browser RFID API. The easy way, or the easier way to do it, is with DataWedge, because what we can do is to allow DataWedge to manage both the RFID reader and the barcode scanner, and we can just receive data from DataWedge via an intent in the Enterprise Browser application. So the big benefit of that is that you can build an application which will run across different mobile RFID platforms, whether it's using an RFID 40 or an RFID 90, or on the newer products like the TC53E with the RFID module built in, and also the EM45. Across all those products, we support the same API set, and what we can do is to allow DataWedge to manage the connection, so we don't need to make any changes to the code in order to run the same application on those different platforms. So that's option one. Option two is that we can use the full Enterprise Browser RFID API, which gives you some additional functionality that you don't have with DataWedge. Probably the most important ones being the ability to check the connected, disconnected status of the RFID reader. And we can also do tag write, which we can't do with DataWedge. And we can also easily programmatically enable tag filters. So if you want to filter out, if you're in a dense tag environment and you want to filter out tags so that you only read tags beginning with a certain prefix, then we can do that with the tag filters in the full API. So advantages and disadvantages to both methods. We're going to look in this session, we're going to look at the DataWedge API, because I think that's the most straightforward to use and to demonstrate. Main point I want to make about using DataWedge to manage the RFID connection is that currently, if you have a disconnect between DataWedge and the RFID reader, so say, for example, you have an RFID 40 with a device connected through the eConnect connection, which is a pogo pin connected to the device. If somebody removes the device from the eConnect sled, then the RFID connection is not available anymore, and you won't get a notification of that using DataWedge. So in that case, it's necessary to reinitialize the DataWedge profile in order to reconnect to the reader. And we're going to look at a couple of ways to do that when we do the demonstration. But basically, that's one of the main differences, or I'd say the main limitations of DataWedge, is that currently we don't have that connected, disconnected status. Whereas if we use the full RFID API, the option 2 in this list, then you will get that connected, disconnected status. So if we look in more detail about using DataWedge, basically the requirement first is we create a DataWedge profile. And what we'll do in this case is create a profile, let's call it EB. We're going to make sure this is not associated with Enterprise Browser. So we don't want to associate the profile specifically with Enterprise Browser. And I'll talk about the reason for doing that a bit later. but we do need to set up an intent output to com.symbol.tw.action. That's the intent action. It's a broadcast intent. So basically, any barcode and RFID data will be sent as a broadcast using that action. And what Enterprise Browser, what the application will do is to listen for that intent and to receive either the tag data or the barcode data through that intent. The other thing we need to do is to make sure that the RFID section of the DataWedge profile has the RFID reader selected and connected. So you need to have a checkbox against whichever RFID reader you have available. Should detect that automatically. If it's not detecting it, then there's some other problem, a connection problem. But normally you'll see the RFID reader will be identified in the profile when you create it. The other preparation step we need to make is to ensure in the Enterprise Browser config.xml that we use DataWedge for scanning. So there's a tag use DW for scanning, which needs to be set to 1 to enable. And we also need to configure the intent receiver. So this is going to receive the broadcast intent sent with that action, and that needs to be configured using these tags in config.xml. So just make sure those steps are followed, otherwise it's not going to work when you actually use your code. And then after we've done that, basically there's some steps that you can follow, which I have documented in a blog, which is available at that link. So that will walk through the steps in more detail. But basically, to try and simplify and streamline the method we're using, what I've done is to extract the DataWedge support JavaScript functionality into a separate JavaScript file, which you can download from this file link. And I've also created just a simple batch file. Basically, when you run the batch file on any simple HTML app, so it needs to be a single page HTML app which implements your application, it will merge in the DataWedge support at the end of the file, and it will also make a couple of changes which we'll look at when we come to the demonstration. But it's basically going to do most of the work in order to RFID enable and barcode enable your application that you already have as a separate web app. So I think I might have. Yeah, okay, that's okay. So yes, as I said, the batch file will merge the code together, and there is a manual edit that you need to do in order to be able to run the app, because it's not smart enough to make a fully working application after it's done the merge. So there's a small manual edit that we need to do. I'll show you that in the demonstration. And just to show you how it can look, I've built some sample apps which are available if you take a device with a pre-configured internet connection, Zebra device, read either the left or the right-hand barcode. This one is XML, this one is JavaScript. So this would be used for Android versions up to 11, and this is 13 onwards. And this will install Enterprise Browser plus some demos. It also installs the Launcher app here, which will allow you to select one of the pre-built demonstrations in order to test it on a device. So basically it does everything you need in order to test this method with some pre-built samples. The only thing you'll need to make sure is that this will install a DataWedge profile. You just need to make sure, as I said previously, that the RFID reader is selected in the DataWedge profile and is available. So demos I've got here, you see there's a simple stock counting demo. It's basically going to read tags and increment a total quantity each time the same tag is seen. There's a mobile point of sale application which will basically read tags and accumulate a total, and then you can print a receipt for that basket, and also is very easy actually to add payment. If you want to use a soft POS type of approach for payment, that can be very simply added just by calling an intent to a soft POS app. And then the third one is a checklist application. So in this example, if you have somebody who has critical equipment that they need in order to go on call, so in this case a paramedic, then this would just be a quick way when they come back from being out to attending to an emergency. They can come back, they can just wave an RFID reader over their kit bag, and it will tell them immediately if all the key equipment is in that bag or if something's missing. So they can then replace anything that was lost or they forgot when they were on site, and it will basically show them immediately what they need to replace. And then final example there is just simple patient ID. So normally in hospital applications, we've traditionally had barcode tagged wrist tags for patients. This is taking that to the next step, which is an RFID tag for the wrist band, which we do have as part of our supplies organization. And this will allow you to do a completely non-contact read of the patient ID, which obviously is very critical in a healthcare environment, because you need to make sure that whatever medication you're administering is going to the correct patient. So for the demo, we're going to use generative AI, in this case OpenAI, through the OpenAI API, and we're going to basically pass a definition of an application, and it's going to build an HTML and JavaScript application as a single HTML page. And it does that pretty well, as you'll see. The main requirement really is that you have to have quite a concise definition of the application that you pass to the API in order to get some usable results. So the more concise the definition, the less variability you'll get in the generated code. Because when you leave something open to interpretation, what you'll see is that each time you submit the same query, it can return some fairly different results depending on how it's interpreted it. So my main tip there is just to make it a very concise description of the application. Once you've built the application with GenAI, save it on a PC, load it into a browser, make sure it's working in terms of the basic functionality before you then modify it to add the RFID API calls. Because once you've added the RFID calls, if you want to modify the app and change the requirement that you forward to OpenAI, in this case, then you'd have to re-add the RFID calls afterwards. So it's better to make sure it's working as fully as possible as a standalone web app without any RFID support, and then add that afterwards. So I've got some demonstration definitions here, just different ones that we can use. So this is the simple stock count app. This is a retail queue busting checkout app. Got the paramedic checklist app, got an operating theatre checklist app, and a patient ID app. So basically the demos that I showed in the previous slide, you can generate. For the demonstration, I'm going to drop out the presentation, and I'm going to cut and paste, or copy and paste, the definition that I've got here for the queue busting application, because that's quite a useful one. And basically now I'm going to switch to an EM45 that I have connected through Bizor wirelessly, and I'm just going to paste. Whoops, let me do that again. Let me just get back to that page. So somehow I managed to lose the page. Right, so go into here, paste that. This is the query, and pasting it into this field. I just hit enter, and it's going to submit that through the OpenAI API, and it's going to generate some code which will appear in this panel. The reason I'm switched to a mobile device to do this is because on our corporate machines, we have a block currently on OpenAI, so I can't do it directly on the same machine as I'm doing the presentation. So that's my generated code. So all I need to do is select that code and copy it. And now I can go to my web, my text editor, paste that code in, and this is the code that's just been generated. So normally what I would do is to take the comments and preserve them, because that's quite useful as some documentation of what it's doing. I'm going to just add a HTML comment marker around that, so it's not going to interfere with the application. And I'm going to save it. So in here, I go to demo and change that to an HTML file type. I'm going to call this MPOS for mobile point of sale. And at that point, if I go to that folder and click on MPOS, then you can see this is the application that's been generated. And if I now take a test code, a valid test code, so this is a 24-character EPC number. You can see each time I enter a different number, it gives me a different item, or if I enter the same number again, it will increment the quantity for the item and it gives me a running total. So it's just really simple mobile point of sale. I can save the receipt, which will download it as a text file into the local device, which in this case is my PC, but could be, just move this bar out of the way. If you look at that as a text file, you can see it's just capturing the EPC ID, description, price, and the quantity, and then the total. And I can also, print the receipt, which in this case is just going to print it in a, well, you're trying to use the print on my PC, but it just prints the receipt in a similar way as what was downloaded. So that's working as I intended it to work, which is good. So what I can do now is go to a command prompt in the same folder. So there's the file that I've just generated, mpos.html, and I can say add RFID _ DataWedge, and then the file name, hit enter, and that's going to do this merge of the DataWedge support, which is in this JavaScript file, with that HTML file. So now if I go back to the source code, it's going to tell me it's been modified, so I need to reload. And basically the modifications it's made is it's added the two includes here, which are required in order to access Enterprise Browser APIs. So it's just added those at the top. It's also in the body on load, it's made a call to start intent listener. And that's just basically calling a standard intent listener that's in the JavaScript file that I appended to the end of this file, and that intent listener is listening for the DataWedge broadcast intents. And that's pretty much it. The last thing it's doing is just adding all the contents of the JavaScript file to the end of this file. So in order to make this work, what I need to do is delete out the existing end script and the end body and end HTML tags, and also the comments here, so that, because those are basically at the end of the JavaScript file anyway, so those are present there. So that then includes all this JavaScript automatically at the end of the existing JavaScript. And basically that's my start intent listener call. This is my intent receiver, which is listening for the DataWedge intents. Basically it's just checking for the source ID to be either RFID, in which case it processes this code, or if it's barcode data, it will process this code. So it's really simple. That's really pretty much it. The rest of the functions there are just miscellaneous support functions, which don't need modification. The only thing I need to do really to make sure this is working, my I already have a function called check item, which is good. So I don't need to modify the intent handler because that's already calling check item with either the RFID tag or with the barcode data. So that's fine. What I can do is if I want to print the data, I can use this existing print function, which is making a intent call to a third-party application, which is on Google Play called RawBT. That's quite an easy app to use because you can just set it up with any Zebra printer, select the language the printer supports, and then you can send the data to the printer using a single intent call, which you can see there. So it really simplifies printing. And if I want to print the receipt, all I need to do is I can remove this stuff because that's not required. My actual print data is in the receipt string. So I can just take that out and I can just say BT print and then receipt string, oops, which is that one. And that should print it to my connected printer. And the other thing I need to do is, I was saying there's an issue potentially with DataWedge where it loses connection with the RFID reader. If I want to have an application button that restores the connection, I can just do a call to restore RFID, which is one of the support functions, and that will try and reset the DataWedge profile so that it basically reconnects automatically to the reader. And that's pretty much it. I think that should be enough. So I just save that file, can go back to the same file and reload it. I normally do that just to make sure it's still working, because if you make a mistake in the JavaScript, it's going to stop the application from working. So I just double check that that's still working first. It looks good. So now I just want to transfer that to my device. So I've got some send to shortcuts here, and one of them is going to basically take this HTML file and set it as the Enterprise Browser start page. So it's going to create a config.xml file that points to this mpos.html. So then I just take those two files, and using a different send to shortcut, I'm going to copy those into the Enterprise Device, Enterprise Browser folder, which is the persistent folder where we can store Enterprise Browser apps. So I'm storing the app on the device itself, and this should then show me that those files have been transferred. There they are, mpos config.xml. So now if I switch back to my device and run Enterprise Browser, what we should see is that now is running that application that we've just generated, which it is. And if I take some barcodes, so here's some sample barcodes, and press the barcode reading string, let me just show you the screen again. Each time I read a barcode, it's just going to look up the item, increment the quantity. So the barcode functionality is there. And if I do a reset of that and then just read some tags, then you can see here it's reading tags. Again, each time it reads the same tag, it's just incrementing the quantity and the total. And now if I do a print receipt, you're not going to be able to see this very well remotely, but I've got a printer that's connected through Bluetooth to my device. I hit print receipt, then it should print out the receipt on that printer, provided my connection's still intact, which might not be. Doesn't look like it's going to print on this printer, but it's probably because I've lost my Bluetooth connection. But basically, normally that will just print out the same information that we saw on the screen when I did the print function will come out on the printer. So just as a simple print of a receipt. So go back to the slides. So hopefully you can see there, it's pretty simple to generate an application using the DataWedge API and to basically include that functionality just through a simple call to a batch file. Just put the lights on because I realize it's getting a bit dark. So that was method one. Method two was to use the full RFID API. And there's a few slides here just to pick out some of the features there. If we use option two, to use the full RFID API, I've got a similar method to merge in the required support. So there's a different blog which you can access through that link again on our developer portal, and there's a different set of support files which are included in this file that's available at that link. But it's the same sort of method. So instead of the add RFID underscore DataWedge, we just use add RFID and then the name of the HTML file, and it will merge the two files together. And again, in a similar way, you've got some demonstrations using the full API, which you can install either through the XML or the JavaScript barcode. Again, it will give you a launcher where you can select the different applications, very similar application types that we've got. But in this case, when you look at the application itself, you can see that here you have a disconnected and connected status. And that's because we can set up an event handler for disconnect and connect, and we can use that event handler to show to the user whether the reader is connected or disconnected. So that's quite a big advantage of using the full RFID API, is you get that connected status. We can also set up easily the tag filters programmatically. So within DataWedge, you can do tag pre-filtering, but you have to modify the DataWedge profile to change the filters, and that tends to be a bit more complex. But with the JavaScript API, the full JavaScript API, we can set up a filter quite easily just by specifying which memory bank we want to apply the filter to. We do an offset of the filter, which is based on the filter length, and a bit count. And basically, the filter itself has to be an even number of characters, and it has to be a minimum of four characters. So if you want to set up a filter, in this case, on all tags beginning with 6780, that would be the filter would be 6780, and you would just configure that through that code in order to make sure that you're only returning tags with that filter prefix. Yeah, I think we've covered that. If you want to add tag write functionality, then again, it's very simple. The JavaScript to do that, you can see here. So again, we just select the memory bank that we're writing to, tag offset, and then we specify the new value. So this would apply after you've read a particular tag, you can then rewrite that tag ID using this code. So probably not that common to need to do that in, a lot of RFID applications are read-only, but if you do, then you would use the full RFID API in order to access the tag write functionality. See if that can't be done with DataWedge, because DataWedge is really only supporting one-way communication. So tag and barcode data coming from DataWedge to the application, but nothing going the other way. And summary references. So we have the full API, which you can access that link on the TechDocs website. Obviously you can use ChatGPT, you can use OpenAI via the API. You can use other generative AI tools as well. So we have an internal Zebra generative AI option. You could use Gemini. You can use the Copilot from Microsoft. In my experience, just doing testing with this method, ChatGPT and OpenAI seems to produce the most consistent results. Just in my experience, it could be that you prefer to use other tools to do the generation, and that's fine. As long as it generates the code that you're looking for and the functionality that you need, then it's completely agnostic in terms of what you use to generate the code. If you preferred, you could write the code yourself or use a web development tool to create it. As long as it was in a single HTML file, you could use the method I provided to merge the DataWedge or the RFID API support. But if you've got multiple HTML files, then you could just take those functions and build them in as required. So this was just done this way really to make it easy to demonstrate. It's not the only way to do it. It's just a way that shows the concept very quickly. And a summary of the blogs that I mentioned earlier. So using GenAI plus DataWedge, and then GenAI with the standard RFID API. And then if you want to see the shortcuts that I use there for launching Enterprise Browser through the demo launcher, then there's another blog that talks about that. So if you have a requirement where you need to access either multiple web servers or multiple web apps through Enterprise Browser, then there's a method we can use to create shortcuts in Enterprise home screen to launch different apps. And we can also use the same method or a similar method to build an app launcher, which you could see in the previous slides. So that can be quite useful in the case where you have that requirement. And I think, hopefully, Priyanka, we're pretty much on time. So
Yes, we are. And thank you.
questions.
And thank you so much, Ian, for the fantastic presentation. We do have a few questions that came in over the Q&A section. So I'm going to jump into those. But if anybody else has any other questions, please use the Q&A, the questions features within Zoom, and we will try our best to address them during this call here. So one of the questions is, which specific Zebra RFID devices are currently supported by Enterprise Browser?
So yeah, we covered there the RFD 40 and 90. So those would be the two newish products, or the kind of mobile RFID sleds that we have. We also can support the TC53E RFID, which is the new TC53 with the integrated reader. And we can also support the EM45, which has just been released, which is more in the smartphone form factor. So it's a much smaller, lighter device, which you could use in a retail environment or a healthcare environment, for example. The exception in terms of our mobile RFID product range is the WS50 RFID, because that's not fully compliant with the existing RFID 3 API. We can't support that at the moment, and also we can't run Enterprise Browser on it because it's got a very small screen. So that's the exception, but the other products I mentioned there are all supported.
Great, thank you. We have a question from John here, that what are the specifications on the web server that is running in the background?
So in the demonstration I showed, we're not using a web server because we're just basically loading the files locally onto the device and then pointing Enterprise Browser to the local file in the config.xml. If I was to put it onto a remote web server, it's just a standard web server. It's basically anything that serves web pages could be used. There's no specific requirement. So I haven't seen any web server it's not compatible with, so it should work fine with pretty much anything that's out there.
Great. Another question from Craig here is, do you have demo projects for SPA like React.js?
We have done some experimentation with React. So best advice there is to have a look on the developer portal, do a search on there, because we do have some, at least one article on there that talks about React. So it's not an officially supported option, but it is something that we have looked into, and it is supportable through DataWedge, through the DataWedge API.
Thank you for answering that. Another question we have here is, can we perform the inventory operations through this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I showed the example of the stock count application that was basically an inventory. Obviously, these are really simple apps. They're just designed to demonstrate proof of concept. But if you wanted to develop those applications and do the work in terms of making it look nice, having a full user interface, doing all the error handling and so on, then you could do that for sure and build a stock count application. And we have some partners who've done that for customers. So yes, absolutely.
Great. We have one question from Rupesh here. What about MC3330XR? As I have around 400 handhelds, we are running the Android app, not the browser. If it is supports it, how we can improve our functionality?
So yes, I actually forgot to mention MC3300R with the RFID reader built in. We can also support with this method. It uses a different physical connection to the reader. So it's a serial connection rather than a Bluetooth or a USB connection, but it will work with the same method as well. So yeah, it's a good point. I should have mentioned that with the supported devices, but it is also one of the supported devices.
Thank you for answering that. Next question is from Santosh. Does Gen AI allows creating complex UI flows similar to how native mobile app supports? And is there a plan to support TC78 in future?
Um, so in terms of the UI, from my experience, it's not doing a very good job about building the UI side. It's very good on the logic side, but not so good on actually the UI. So if you do something like you generate some code and then you say make it look nice, then it doesn't really do very much to make it look better. So I think that's really where, if you look at as a developer at where the effort should be, if you're using generative AI, then it's definitely on the UI side and the user experience that you can really add something which you can't do currently with generative AI, certainly not that I've seen. You can add a lot of value by actually understanding a user's requirements and making the user interface work, exactly to those requirements. So in terms of the TC78, we do support that currently with the RFDs. So if you want to build and deploy an app on a TC78, which is RFID enabled, use either the RFD 40 or the RFD 90 with the eConnect sled, which allows you to connect the TC78 or TC73. And it would be quite a bulky configuration, I have to say, because those are, if you say take a TC78, put it on top of an RFD 90, you've got quite a large assembly when they're both put together. So it would be something you'd use in a really rugged environment, demanding environment, because of the size of it. But I think it would give you a pretty ruggedized and sealed RFID solution for a heavy industrial environment.
Great. Thank you so much for answering this question. About the question MC3330XR, we have an extension to that question. Do you have any demos for this? And also, do you have any program where we can register and get on-site training for engineers?
So I haven't modified demos for the MC3300 currently, but I can do that. And I can probably add those as a appendix to one of the blogs, say the DataWedge blog. I think we could do that fairly easily. So keep an eye on the developer portal. I'll try and add a demo for 3300. In terms of training on it, I'm not sure what we're offering internally through the symbol, through the Zebra portal, the education portal. So I'd have to have a look. I can't say at the moment. We don't have anything that's current in terms of training material. The main reference for the products would be the TechDocs website and the developer portal and the software download portal. That's where the manuals are for the products. So I think that would be the place to start, is with those three websites. Have a look. If you log on to the partner portal, you'll be able to see what training programs we offer to partners. I don't think there'll be anything specifically on 3300, but it would be worth having a look.
Great. Hope that answers your question, Rupesh. And we have one question from John here. Is there a Zebra developer conference in North America? And I think I can answer that, Ian. We have a Zebra developer conference called DevCon happening in on June 4th to 6th in Amsterdam, Netherlands. And we are thrilled to host our ISVs and Alliance Partner Summit along with DevCon. And it offers unparallelable opportunities for visibility and engagement. This is the conference that will connect with nearly 300 developers, executives, and Zebra employees. So yes, we have a conference happening in EMEA in Netherlands, Amsterdam City. So hope you can come and join us there, and look out for the registration link, which we will be sharing with our audience soon. So hope that answers your question. For more questions, please feel free to reach out to us at developer@zebra.com. And with that, we wrap up our session here. We really appreciate you joining us for this session. Thank you so much, Ian, for the fantastic presentation. And please watch out for a quick survey that will appear as soon as this webinar ends. We greatly value your feedback, so please take a minute to share your thoughts with us. And we look forward to seeing you in our next Dev Talk. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, audience.